This is a lecture on the topic called labor costing. This is the first lecture in this topic, and in two lectures, I intend to cover this topic. I'm going to spend the first few minutes to give you an introduction to this topic area. And in the introduction, I'll be mainly focusing on two things. Number one, I will be talking about how this topic fits in the big picture. And what I mean by this is if the entire subject of cost and management accounting is taken, and if I call that as the entire scheme of things, then in that big picture, how this topic labor costing would fit in. So that's going to be what we will be looking at as one part and the first part in the introduction. And after this is done, I will give you a broad overview about the topic outline. And in this, I will be telling you what are the main areas that we will be looking at in this topic. And once that is done, then we are done with the introduction part to this topic area, and then we can start looking at the concepts in this topic area. So now let's look at the introduction, and within the introduction, let's look at the first part, which is about the big picture. Now, let's first look at the objective for having a cost accounting system. So what is the objective if a company goes about having a cost accounting system? The main objective of having a cost accounting system is to find out the cost of a cost object. So you want to find out the cost of a cost object. So this is the main objective of having a cost accounting system. So what's important here to notice, you want to find out the cost and you want to find out the cost of a cost object. Now what is a cost object and why do we want to find out the cost of a cost object? A cost object is any entity for which you can talk about calculating cost or finding out cost or collecting cost. So any entity for which you can collect cost or you can find out cost is what we call as a cost object. To take some examples, for a manufacturing company, for a company which manufactures a certain product, a product itself is a cost object. So we can say the manufacturing company can look at finding out the cost of every unit produced. So the manufacturing company might want to understand what is the cost that it incurs to manufacture every unit of that product. So a product can be a cost object, or a service activity can also be a cost object. For example, if we take some service firms, some auditing firms or some consulting firms, they may want to find out the cost of rendering every service activity. For example, if I'm an audit firm, I want to know what is the cost of performing one audit. So to perform one statutory audit to one of my clients, what is the cost that I incur? So a service activity could be one cost object. An entire division could be one cost object. So we looked at product as a cost object, we looked at service activity as a cost object. Sometimes a division in a large company could also be a cost object. Let's say I am a big manufacturing company. I am into the manufacturing of 4 types of products. Let's say product A, B, C and D. Now I have division A which manufactures product A, I have division B which manufactures product B, I have division C which manufactures product C, and I have division D, let's say, that manufactures product D. Now I want to find out what is the cost of operating division A, for instance, or I want to find out what is the cost of operating division D. So here I want to find out the cost associated with running one specific division. So the division is what I call as the cost object here. Or for a large group company which has several subsidiary companies inside, for running one subsidiary company, the large group wants to understand what is the cost involved. So an entire company itself could be a cost object. So that's why we'll have to understand a cost object to be an entity for which cost can be collected or for which cost can be calculated. So any entity for which I want to calculate cost is what I call as a cost object. So the objective of cost accounting is to find out the cost of a cost object. Now, when we look at this process of finding out the cost of a cost object, we understand that there are several types of costs. You don't have just one type of cost and say This is the cost for every unit of cost object. There are several types of cost, and when I say several types of cost, what I mean is costs of different natures. And this is why the subject of cost and management accounting also has several chapters, and each chapter focuses on one specific type of cost or a specific way in which the costing has to happen. So when we look at cost, and when we after understanding that there are several types of costs, we understand that one important item, one important type of cost is what we call as labor cost. And when I say labor cost, what immediately comes to our mind is the cost that an entity incurs to get work done, because work is something that is very important and is common to any type of entity we talk about, be it a manufacturing company or be it a service company or be it an education company. Whichever type of entity you talk about, work needs to happen, and for work to happen, cost needs to be incurred. So the cost to get work done is what we can at this stage understand as labor cost, and that is definitely one important component of cost. Materials required to get work done is another important component. So the cost of materials is one important component of cost, but now we are going to be focusing on labor as an important component of cost. So our focus is going to be on labor cost. Now it's important at this stage to understand that whatever be the nature of the cost object, we may want to find out the labor cost associated. So what I mean by this is, a manufacturing company may want to find out what is the labor cost involved for manufacturing one unit of the product. To get one unit of the product manufactured, what is the cost I need to pay, what is the cost I need to incur to get work done? So this means I'm finding out the labor cost for a product as a cost object. Or an audit firm may want to find out what is the cost of getting one audit done, right? So in those cases, it is still labor cost that we are looking at, but we are looking at a cost object as a service activity and not as a product. Or a company may want to find out what is the labor cost involved with running a certain division. So a certain division is looked at the cost object, and for running that division, work needs to happen in that division, and for that the division would incur some labor cost. So what is that cost we want to find out? So for any type of cost object, we may want to understand what is the labor cost associated. Now at this stage, it is important to understand that depending on the cost object we are talking about, we classify labor cost into two types. We have direct labor cost as one categorization, and we have the other, which is indirect labor cost. What do we mean by, what is the basis of this classification? Why do we have something called as direct labor cost, and why do we have something called as an indirect labor cost? The cost associated to get work done, which has a direct connection with the cost object, is what we call as a direct labor cost. To give you an example, if you take a product as a cost object, I want to find out, I'm considering a product as a cost object. Every unit of a product, let's say, is a cost object. Now, to manufacture every unit, you may hire a person who works for 5 hours, and for each hour the person may be paid 10 rupees. So for one unit of the product to be manufactured, 50 rupees may have to be spent. So we say that for that product, 50 rupees of labor cost has to be spent, or 50 rupees of labor cost has to be incurred. So we can understand that here the labor cost of 50 rupees that we are talking about in this example has a very direct connection with that one unit. In other words, we can say if we didn't have that labor cost incurred, we couldn't have had that one unit of that product come out as a finished unit of output. So when the labor cost is directly related to the cost object, then we call that as a direct labor cost. Now, having a product as a cost object, let me give you an example of what I would classify as an indirect labor cost. Let's say manufacturing of a certain product is happening. I am a company, let's say, and I'm manufacturing a product called product A. and I'm manufacturing several units of product A, every unit of a product is what I consider as a cost object. So for one unit of product A, what is the cost associated? I want to find out. Now every unit of product A, in our previous example, let's say we looked at 50 rupees as the labor cost. So 50 rupees was associated with every unit of product A. Now let's say there are 2-3 workers like that working on product A, but there is one supervisor who is supervising the work happening with respect to the manufacturing of product A. Now that supervisor is also paid some money. Now supervisor's money salary, the amount that is paid to the supervisor to supervise the people who are engaged in manufacturing product A, that is also a labor cost, because that is also a cost incurred by the company for getting work done. If the supervisor does not supervise, probably the workers do not work properly. So we can say that work probably would not get done. So the amount that is paid to the supervisor for his supervision of the workers who are connected with the manufacturing of product A, that is also to be classified as labor cost, but that is something I would classify as an indirect labor cost, because I cannot trace the amount I pay to the supervisor to one particular unit. I can't say that out of the money that I pay the supervisor, this portion belongs to one unit of product A, that portion belongs to another unit of product B. I can't tell that. I just pay him an amount for him to supervise. Whereas when I talk about the workers producing product A, they spend 5 hours for every unit, and each unit is paid rupees 10. So I can in fact say that 50 rupees is directly traced to one unit of product A, but I can't say the supervisor's pay is directly traced to product A. So in that case, the supervisor's pay is also to be treated as labor cost, but I would classify that as indirect cost. But I would classify the worker's pay as a direct cost. So what is important to understand is, based on the cost object, labor cost is classified into direct and indirect cost. But if I were to change the cost object, and let's say product A is getting manufactured in one factory. In that same factory, let's say there are 2 other products, product B and product C. 2 other products are getting manufactured. Now I want to find out what is the cost of operating the factory itself. So now my cost object is not a unit of product A or not a unit of product B. It is the factory itself which is engaged in the manufacturing of A, B and C. Now in that case, the supervisor's pay is now directly related with the factory, because the cost object is the factory. If the supervisor were not to be present, then probably the factory operations would not be happening. So I can now directly trace the supervisor's pay to the factory. Let's say factory 1 has 2 supervisors. The pay to both of these supervisors is directly related to that factory. So now what happens is, the supervisor's pay also becomes a direct cost. Something in our previous example was classified as an indirect cost, now becomes a direct cost. Now why is that the case? Because the cost object changed. The cost object changed. Earlier the cost object was one unit of a product. Here the cost object was an entire factory itself. I wanted to understand what is the cost of running that one factory. So in that case, the supervisor's pay also was classified as a direct cost. So it's important to understand that when you talk about labor cost, it could be for any cost object, but the only thing is, based on the nature of the cost object, you would classify a certain item of a labor cost as a direct cost or as an indirect cost. So that's something that's important to understand. At this stage, what we have seen is, the goal of cost accounting is to find out the cost associated with the cost object. And when we talk about cost, there are several types of cost. One important cost is the labor cost, and labor cost could be associated with any type of cost object, and based on that you have a classification of direct cost and indirect cost. So that's all that we have seen here, and now we kind of have an idea about where labor cost would fit into the big picture, and why a study of this topic is in fact important when someone embarks on the study of cost and management accounting. Just like how we feel that studying about the cost of materials is important, studying about the cost of labor is equally important. Now that we have had a brief idea about labor cost, let's look at the peculiarity about labor cost as compared to other items of cost. Now I'm going to make a statement here. I'm going to say labor cost has a little bit of peculiarity. Now why I choose to say this is because when I look at labor cost, I obviously know I have a human element here. I have a human element here, which I do not have in the case of most other factors of production. Now, why will this human element make this labor cost a little peculiar? Now, that's important to understand. We understand labor cost is peculiar in this sense, but why? Why is this human element making labor cost a little peculiar? The answer to this is simple. There are a few things which probably we do not expect with the other factors of production. To give you a simple example here, let's say there are workers and I'm looking at making compensation payment to them. This compensation payment, I would say, has a psychological impact on the workers. Now, my choosing to pay them a bonus or my choosing to give them a reward by way of an extra salary for 2 or 3 days, all of these things definitely would have some kind of a psychological impact. And probably the more I pay them, I can even think of extracting better work from them, and the productivity could increase. Now, if I compare this with materials, if I were to use 1 kg of a particular raw material, now that 1 kg of raw material can do to me only a certain things. The 1 kg of raw material, whether I pay 5 rupees and buy that 1 kg, or whether I'm ready to pay 8 rupees and buy that 1 kg, that 1 kg is not going to do me different things. It's going to just do me the same thing whether I buy it at 5 rupees per kg or 10 rupees per kg. That 1 kg of raw material is not going to come and tell me, you know what, if you pay me 10 rupees per kg, I'll be a better 1 kg of raw material, but if you pay me 6 rupees, I cannot promise you to be that good a kg of raw. That doesn't make sense, right? But you can't say the same thing for a worker. I tell him, look, please, let's say I meet a worker and tell, please put in your best efforts. I would look at increasing your pay by 25%. Well, that could motivate him, and the productivity that I get from him that day could be far superior. So there are a lot of psychological aspects when you look at labor cost because of the human element that is present. Yet another thing is, when you talk about labor cost and when you talk about people working, the question of spoilage is something that is not there. Now, what I mean by this, let me give you a simple example. Let's consider a certain scenario here where let's say there are usually 10 workers. They do a certain job, and probably on a specific day or a specific week, what actually happens is, for some reason, out of these 10 workers, let's say 6 workers want to go on a strike. They want to go on a strike, they don't want to work. Now, at this stage, what I do is the 4 workers who do not go on a strike, I go and make them a good payment. I tell them, I will increase your pay by 100%. So you may have to work a little extra here because the other 6 are not working. So I'm going to pay you a lot. And I also, let's say, I motivate them by telling them, you are now very important. You will be a part of the company. I tell them all of these things, and I tell them I will increase your pay by 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%. Now, what this could mean is, all of these 4 workers could now start putting in a lot more work, and I might not probably even feel the loss of 6 people. No, I'm not concluding anything here saying that the 4 people will make good the work of the 6 people who walked out. I'm not saying that, but that's sometimes a possibility. But when you look at materials, raw materials, let's say I have 10 kgs of raw materials. There are 3 kgs that, let's say, they get spoiled. There is a fire or something, they get spoiled. Now the 7 kgs can still do only the job of what 7 kgs can do. The 3 kgs that I've lost, 3 kgs I've lost. I can't do anything about that. So if you look at a lot of these things, you still find the peculiar element there, the peculiarity there because of the human element. So that is sometimes why labor cost is something that's very interesting, and research in the past has also told that focusing on labor cost could not only look on increasing the productivity, but that's also an area where cost control or cost reduction is something that can be seriously pursued. So that's a very important aspect about labor cost that one needs to know. So now we have kind of had an idea about labor cost as such, how it fits into the big picture. Before I go to the outline part of this chapter, one important thing I want to tell you here is I want to spend some time on this word labor here. Now, what do I mean by labor, and why am I using the word labor in this context here? When I use the word labor here, now I'm having a kind of bias towards factory workers. So when I'm talking about labor here, I'm in fact having a bias towards factory workers. And when I say a bias towards factory workers, I do not have a personal bias. The chapter that we are discussing here has a bias towards factory workers for the simple reason that now we are talking about cost incurred by a company to get work done. Now, there are so many people who do different types of work for a company, and all of that work is important for the company to run. But are we talking about all of these people doing their work and the cost incurred to make them work? No, we are mainly talking only about factory workers. Whenever the word labor is used, or for that matter, the word wages is used, you immediately kind of associate that with a factory kind of setup. Now, as much as it is not something that's very strictly defined, you can definitely use the word labor for for a person who does not work in a factory. We do understand the meaning of what someone intends to say in those contexts, but more often when you use the word labor, it's very closely connected with factory workers. And that's why, if I'm an accountant, I'm working as an accountant, or I'm working as a finance manager, well, I'm going to call myself as an employee of the company. I don't call myself as a laborer of the company. So I'm going to say I'm an employee in the finance department. No, I'm not going to say I'm a laborer in the finance department. But when you talk about a factory worker, these are the people you also call them. You attach the word labor to these type of workers. And similarly, if I'm a finance manager, then I would talk about drawing a salary from the company. I'm not going to be talking about drawing monthly wages from the company. I'm going to say this is my monthly salary. I won't say this is my monthly wages. Although if I say monthly wages and I refer to the same thing, that's nothing wrong. It's not a crime. But the word salary is associated with employees, and the word wages is associated with factory workers. And here in this topic, we do have a bias towards factory workers, and we are in fact talking about the cost of factory work happening. So that's another important point for us to keep on top of our head before we proceed. So with this, we understand the first part. We wind up the first part of the introduction, which is looking at the big picture. Now we will be looking at the outline of this topic. So in the outline, what I'm going to be talking about is what are the main topic areas in this chapter that we will be focusing at. So I'm going to split this topic into three parts, or at least the lectures that we are going to be having, I'm going to split this into three parts here. Let's look at these three parts. The first is going to be called as wage payment and incentives. This is going to be the first part, and in fact in this lecture we are going to be looking at this part here, wage payment and incentives. Then the second part is going to be called as overtime and idle time labor cost. So this is the second topic. And the third topic in this, the third subtopic I would say, is called as labor turnover. So we can broadly categorize this entire chapter into three parts. The first part is on wage payment and incentives. The second part is on overtime and idle time labor, and the third is on labor turnover. Now let's have a quick idea of what each of these things, let's have a bird's eye view, I would say, about each of these three things, and then let's focus on the first part here. Let's start discussing about the first part here. Now, in the first part, when we look at wage payment and incentives, we are going to be looking at different systems in which the workers can be compensated. So when you talk about making a payment to workers, there's not one way. There is no one way in which a wage payment is going to happen. So there could be different systems in which wage payment could happen. And why do different systems exist? Because each system has its probably its own advantages. So from that perspective, it's important for us to understand that there are different systems. So we are going to be having a broad idea about a few important systems, and we're also going to be focusing on incentives. And what we mean by incentives here is what is that the company or the entity would give to the workers to motivate them to work and to motivate them to work more productively. So that's what we call as incentives. We just understood little back that when you talk about labor cost, which is basically the cost incurred by a company to get work done, there is a human element and there's a lot of psychological impact. So the more the incentives I offer, I can expect loyalty from my workers, and I can also expect increased productivity. So incentives is going to be a very important part of this of the discussion, which is with respect to the labor cost. So different wage payment schemes and incentives at a high level we will be looking at. Then we will look at the second part, which looks at overtime and idle time labor cost. So as the let's have a broad idea of what each of these things would mean. When you look at overtime, we, as the name indicates, beyond the scheduled time, if workers engage in work, then how should that be treated, right? So let's say a typical work day is 8 hours, and for some reason workers work for 9 hours or 10 hours or 11 hours. So if they work overtime, then for that extra time that they work, how is that going to be treated? Now, well, why is that going to be special? I mean, why do we have a separate section devoted for that? We will take that up for discussion when we look at that second part. But at a high level, I can tell you, the reason why I feel that there's a separate part for discussion is the fact must be noted that people are stretching and working. So for that, how is that could be linked with incentives? So that's what we will be looking. That's why I would say overtime is warrants a special discussion. Similarly, when we look at idle time, what we mean by idle time is, as the name again here as the name indicates, the time when the workers are present but do not engage in work. So that's what we call as idle time. Now, how should idle time be treated? Should idle time be paid money? So let's say a worker comes to the factory at 9 o'clock, and or let's say he walks into the factory at 10 o'clock and walks out of the factory at 6 o'clock. So it might look like he's in the factory for 8 hours, but let's say 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. is lunchtime. So that's an idle time. So the worker is there in the factory, and if he's going to clock in his in time and out time, he would probably clock in 8 hours, but he's idle for 1 hour. And let's probably say that 3:30 p.m. to 3:45 p.m. or 3:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. There is a scheduled power cut, and for 30 minutes work does not happen. So let's say out of a 8-hour day, 1.5 hours the workers do not work. So this is what we call as idle time. So do we pay them for those 1.5 hours? If we pay them, how do we treat that labor cost? So all that again is what we will be looking at in the second part. Then when we look at the third part here, when we look at labor turnover here, we are mainly talking about employees leaving the organization, and we will also be looking at how they get replaced and all that stuff. So we will look into it a lot more when we focus on the third part in detail. But when we talk about labor turnover at a high level, you should understand that we are talking about employees leaving an organization. Now, it's important here. I'm reminded of a funny incident. Whenever you use the word turnover, you kind of relate it to sales, and you have probably learned a lot of turnover ratios, right? Fixed assets turnover ratio. You say sales divided by fixed assets. Then debtors turnover ratio, credit sales divided by debtors, right? So I'm told that when students were asked labor turnover, those who didn't know about labor turnover told it was sales divided by average labor. No, it's not that. So here when we use the word turnover, it's not a ratio. I mean, it's still a ratio we are talking about, but that's not how we should understand labor turnover. We will understand it better in the subsequent lecture when we look at this concept. So this is the broad outline of this topic area. So now that we understand this, let's go ahead to discuss about the first area here. Let's look at wage payment schemes and incentives. So let's look at this itself. I'm going to be classifying this broadly into three here, three parts. First, I'm going to be talking about something called as a time rate basis. Then there is something called as a piece rate basis. And then we have bonus plans. So we are going to be looking at three parts here: time rate basis, piece rate basis, and bonus plans. So again, let's quickly look at what each of these things are, and we will learn them a lot more in detail by looking at some questions. We will be looking at a few questions here, and through those questions we will understand the operation or the application of all of these concepts. But before we go to those questions here, let's have a broad idea of what each of these things mean. So when you look at time rate basis, what we actually mean by time rate basis is payment um, payment is linked to the time worked. That's what we call, as the name indicates, payment is linked to the time worked. So a rate is fixed for every unit of time, and the number of units of time worked is multiplied with that rate, and the workers are compensated. For example, there could be an hourly rate. So every worker could be told, for every 1 hour of work you do, you would be paid 20 rupees. So if the worker works for 5 hours, then he has the right to claim 100 rupees. So that's what we call as a time rate basis. And this is a pretty, I would say this is a pretty famous scheme of wage payment. And in fact, this is also very famous not only in the context of factory workers, but also in the context of professional consultants, right? So when professional consultants go in for either teaching, or they go in for consulting or advising, when they go in for all those activities, they are basically offered a time. They are basically offered fees. We can call it as fees. They are offered fees in terms of the number of hours worked. So an auditor tells his client, let's say I've put in 8 hours or 9 hours into this audit. For every hour, I'm going to charge you 2,000 rupees, right? Or 5,000 rupees, whatever. So the time rate basis, which where the payment is linked with the time, is equally famous even in the context of professional work, and it's not just famous in the context of factory work, although we will be restricting our discussion mainly to factory work here. Then comes our piece rate basis, where what happens is the payment made to the workers is linked to the output. So instead of telling the workers, I'm going to pay you 20 rupees for every hour that you have worked, I am probably telling them, for every unit that you produce, I'm going to be paying you, let's say, 5 rupees or 10, whatever is the rate. So I fix a rate for every output, every unit of output, and hence my payment would depend on the output produced by the workers. Now this is why you can see the use of the word piece rate, phrase piece rate here. In the earlier case, you saw the use of the phrase time rate. So again here, the reason why we use the excuse me. The reason why we use the phrase piece rate is mainly because as much as we say, when we say factory, we are actually looking at a manufacturing environment. And in in a manufacturing environment, we are coming out with units, right? Which we can also call as pieces. So for every piece that is produced, probably there's a rate. That's why we call it a piece rate basis. So you have a payment, and that payment is linked with output. Now, which of the two systems is better is not a discussion that we are going to be looking at, because each of the two systems would have its own set of advantages and its own set of limitations. When you look at the time rate basis, the advantage would be every hour that the employee works, he is paid for that. If he doesn't work probably for a few hours, he is not paid for that. And also from the employee's perspective, from the worker's perspective here, he's going to feel happy, right? So I put in 4 hours of work, I got what I'm supposed to get. So that's an advantage. But one limitation in the time rate basis that we can look at, or we can think of, is when I tell a worker that I'm going to pay you 20 rupees for every hour of work you do, then I'm not really talking about how productive he should be in that 1 hour of time that he puts in. So what if instead of manufacturing 5 units, which he could normally do, he ends up manufacturing just 3 units, right? Can I tell him anything about that? Can I tell him your second 1 hour was less productive than your first 1 hour, so I'm going to pay you only lesser? I can't tell him, because I've told him for every 1 hour of your work, this is what I'll pay you. So when you talk about a pure time rate basis, one of the limitations that we can think of is we are not focusing on productivity. Now, when you look at piece rate basis, the advantage is that you're looking at productivity. Instead of telling the worker, I would pay you 20 rupees for every hour, I'm telling him I'll pay you so much for every unit. So here I'm looking at productivity. So you are smart enough to get more number of units in lesser time, fine. You still get paid for every unit. So what we focus on when you look at piece rate basis is the output. But here in piece rate basis, there are some limitations, right? Now, one of the limitations in piece rate basis that we can look at is, if I link the wage payment to the productivity, then to get more wages, workers could just start reducing the time they take to produce every unit. They could just go on, a rapid round. So when they were probably taking an hour to manufacture 5 units, they could probably use 1 hour to start manufacturing 8 or 9 units, and in that entire process, the quality could suffer. So when you look at a piece rate basis, that's a serious disadvantage that we have here. When we focus too much on productivity, we probably do not look at quality. And yet another problem from the worker's perspective is, for some reason, on a particular day, reasons beyond my reasons not within my control. Let's say I'm a worker, and for reasons not within my control, on by spending 1 hour or in one day, I'm able to produce only 80 units. On some other day, I was able to produce 100 units. But the day I produced only 80 units. It was not purely within my control, because probably there was a machine downtime, something like that. So from the worker's perspective, he probably does not feel secured when you offer him a complete piece rate basis. So there could be a mixture of both, where there could be a minimum pay based on time rate, and for productivity, you could have a piece rate basis coming inside. So there could be a combination of all of these things. So we are not looking at which one of the two is the better one here. That's not the idea. We're just getting introduced to all of these things at a high level. Then we look at bonus here. So basically, bonus is incentivizing for increasing productivity without sacrificing quality, obviously. So when you look at bonus here, basically, we are going to be categorizing bonus into two. We'll basically look at two plans. One is called as Halsey's bonus plan, and the other is called as Rovan's bonus plan. These are two people, and they have given their ideas regarding how bonus has to be structured. So Halsey's plan and Rovan's plan. We will be looking at two of these things. Here again, when you talk about bonus, bonus is an important component of payment, of compensation, not just for factory workers, but for higher level employees also, right? So even the CFO of an organization gets a bonus, but we are mainly going to look here at bonus to factory workers, and that's going to be our agenda here. So this is the broad overview of wage payment scheme. So now what we will do is, we have not looked at how bonus has to be calculated using the Halsey plan, or how bonus has to be calculated using the Rovan plan. We have not done that. But to do that, we will take the first question, and in looking at the first question, we will also be understanding how all of these things need to be put into practice. So now you can see the first question here. So problem number 1. During 1 week, the workman X manufactured 200 articles. He receives wage for a guaranteed 44-hour week at the rate of rupees 15 per hour. The estimated time to produce one article is 15 minutes, and under incentive scheme, the time allowed is increased by 20%. Calculate his gross wages under each of the following methods of remuneration. So time rate basis, piecework with a guaranteed weekly wage, and C, Rowan premium bonus, and D, you have Halsey premium bonus 50% to workman. So let's look at all of these things one by one. Let's just go uh, by following each of these methods and looking at what the gross wages would be. So the first thing that we are asked to do is the time rate basis. So what would a time rate basis mean? Based on the number of hours worked, the rate per unit of time is going to be used. So here the second line of the question tells us that the worker receives wage for a guaranteed 44-hour week. So he works for 44, so you're paying him for 44 hours in a week at the rate of rupees 15 per hour. So obviously we understand that when you have to calculate the gross wages, it's going to be 44 hours into rupees 15 per hour. So let's do that. So let's look at the first thing here, which is wages gross, and specifically let's look at time rate system here. So it's absolutely very simple for us to calculate. Wages is going to be equivalent to 44 hours into rupees 15 per hour. Basically, if you have to look at a formula for this, you could say number of hours into rate per hour. 44 into 15 gives us rupees 660. So this is the wages if you adopt the time rate system. It's as simple as this. Now let's look at what will be the wages if you adopt the piece rate system. Now let's go back to the question here. So you can see that you are not given what is the rate for every unit of output. You are told how many units the workman manufactures. He manufactures 200 articles. That's told to us in the first line of the question itself. But you are not told how many, what is the rate for every piece which is manufactured. Now in this case, how can we use the piece rate basis? Now it's pretty simple to do this. The only thing that's required is we'll have to infer a piece rate. Now how do we infer a piece rate? One of the lines in the question tells us, in fact the third line tells us, the estimated time to produce one article is 15 minutes. We know that 15 minutes is 1/4 of an hour. So if one article takes us takes the worker 15 minutes time to produce, then we can say if he works for 1 hour, he is going to be manufacturing 4 units. So 4 articles for every 1 hour of the worker's engagement. So we also know that the worker is guaranteed 15 rupees per hour. So indirectly what we are saying is to manufacture 4 articles, you will be paid rupees 15. So if 4 articles would get you 15 rupees, then obviously 15 by 4 will tell us what is the cost or rate for every piece. So let's infer that. So we are going to say number of pieces is 200 into for every piece you will be paid 15 by 4. So let's see what 15 by 4 gives us a 3.75. 15 by 4, 3.75 into 200. This gives us rupees 750. So this is the idea. Okay. So now how did we get, what is the significance of each of these things here? 200 is the number of pieces and 15 by 4 is the inferred piece rate. Okay, so if piece rate is not directly given, we can also infer it like this. So now we see that when 2 different systems of wage payment is used, we get 2 different values. Now as a worker, what would you probably choose? Now if I was a worker, I would choose 750 rupees here, because that, I mean, obviously it works out to be a higher number for me. But the question is, suppose in this week I was able to manufacture only, let's say, 100 units. Then 100 into 3.75 gives me 375 rupees. In that case, I would rather go for the time rate basis. 44 into 15 gives me 660. So it's a tricky thing here. That's why you have something called as a piece rate system with a minimum wage guarantee. So probably the system could work like this here. The worker could be told minimum of 660 will be given to you, But if the piece rate system gives you anything higher, we'll give you the piece rate. But if the piece rate system is going to give you something lesser than 660, at least 660 will be given. This could be what we mean when we say a piece rate system with a minimum guarantee, right? So it's as simple as this. So now let's look at the third thing, Rowan premium bonus and Halsey premium bonus. Let's look at what each of these things are. Let's look at the third thing here, which is Rowan bonus. Now, let's apply a certain formula here. We understand the logic for that. Rowan bonus basically says time taken into time rate. This is the minimum that an employee has to be paid. Time taken into time rate plus time saved divided by time allowed into time taken into time rate. So this is the formula for Rowan bonus. So it is important that you commit this formula to memory, but we can also understand the logic behind this formula. So when you have to answer an exam question, we obviously wouldn't have time to analyze the logic and the beauty of this formula. It's important that we just know that this exists and we know how to fit in numbers and then work out whatever we should work out from an exam perspective. But we can also take some time to understand what is the logic behind this formula. So we can see two components here. I'm going to call this entire one thing as the first component, and I'm going to call this entire second thing as the second component. So what this actually tells us is, if you look at the first component, time taken into time rate. Now this is basically a time rate system, right? So we have that in Rowan bonus basically to tell us that minimum payment that any worker must get will be the wages he will be eligible if you use the time rate system. Whatever is the time taken, multiply that with time rate. So this is the minimum. Then after the minimum, what you could do is, the second part is what talks about the bonus component. So when you look at Rowan's plan, if the total wages are to be calculated, you should do 1 plus 2. The two components must come inside, you should do 1 plus 2. But if you just want to know what is the bonus element as suggested by Rowan, then you should just use the second component here, which says time saved by time allowed into time taken into time rate. This is what only the second component talks about the bonus element. 1 plus 2 talks about the total wages as suggested by Rowan. So what Rowan is saying is, after you guarantee a minimum, now you talk about a bonus to your worker. You tell the worker, well, I will compensate you on an hourly basis or whatever it is. Sometimes it could be a half hourly basis. So for now we can take 1 unit of time to be 1 hour for simplicity. But you need to understand that it need not just be 1 hour, right? The payment could be based on so many rupees for every 3 hours worked. So it could be like that also. So many rupees for every 15 minutes worked. So we are looking at 1 hour. So Rowan says, tells the company that for every hour worked, you could offer a time rate. But after that, you tell the worker, if you are able to have some time saved, that means if you're able to finish the work much earlier, then you are eligible for a bonus. So here we introduce two components. We have something called as a time allowed. So Rowan says, when you assign a work to a certain person or a group of people, you give them a time allowed. And then you tell them, if you are able to complete it earlier, then there is something called as time saved. So when there is time saved, then Rowan says, time saved by time allowed, this is kind of indicating an efficiency. For example, if I allow a person to complete a job in 10 hours, now he completes it in 8 hours, then you have a time saving of 2 hours. So I can say the ratio of time saved to time allowed is 20%. But if the same worker finishes the work in 6 hours, then the time saved is 4 hours. So 4 by 10 gives a 40%. So the ratio of time saved to time allowed is going to be 40%. So the faster you complete, the more will be the time saved to time allowed ratio. So what actually happens is this entire thing is going to get multiplied with again the minimum. So what Rowan is saying is after the minimum, you tell the worker if you're able to save time by completing earlier, again on your minimum something extra will be also given to you. So that's the bonus element. So what happens here from this, what we can understand is the more the time saved because the workers are able to complete earlier, what will happen is for the worker he is going to get some bonus, that's an incentive. For the company which is making the payment, if time saved is higher, then obviously time taken to do the work will be lesser, because only if time taken goes down, time saved can go up. So from the company's perspective, its cost also will come down. So from employee's perspective, from the worker's perspective, he will be attracted to save time because he knows he is going to get a bonus. But from the company's perspective, it is also going to benefit by lesser cost. So that's the entire idea of Rowan bonus. So this is the logic behind how this formula is structured this way. But from purely an exam perspective, to answer a question, you don't need to know the logic. You just need to remember this fit in numbers. But understanding the logic when you learn the concept for the first time is definitely important. So now what we will do here is we are going to be fitting numbers into this and we are going to go about the discussion. So we see here that under the incentive scheme, the time allowed is increased by 20 percentage, right? So what we mean by, let us see what we mean by 20 percentage here. So um, for every 4 units, for every unit 15 minutes is the time that is given. So what actually happens is time allowed for every unit, let's calculate. So normally 15 minutes, but if this plan is to be implemented, they are saying 15 minutes plus 1/5 of 15 minutes. 15 minutes plus 1/5 of 15 minutes. So 1/5 of 15, why do you say 1/5 of 15 minutes? 20 percentage. So going back here, it says, and under incentive scheme, the time allowed is increased by 20 percentage. So 15 minutes plus 1/5 of 15 minutes, 20 percentage of 15 minutes. So we get 3 minutes here. So for every product, you get 18 minutes time. And now this is 18 minutes per product per unit. So now how many units is this worker manufacturing? 200 units. 200 units into 18 minutes. You want to express this in terms of hours, you divide this by 60. So what actually happens is you strike off this here. So you get 3. So here now you get 60 hours. So from this we understand that time allowed for 200 articles is 60 hours. So now how much time is this worker taking? Let us see. Let's put in substitute numbers here. So our worker takes 44 hours and each hour he is paid a rate of, let's see what is the amount he is paid. He is paid 15 rupees per hour. So this is one component. For 44 hours into 15 rupees is one component. Now let's look at the time saved. If 60 hours is the time given and 44 hours is the time taken, then 60 minus 44, 16 hours is the time saved. So 16 divided by 60, you get time saved by time allowed into, let me put this in the same ink as I did this here. 16 divided by 60 into time taken into time rate. So that is going to be 44 into 15. So this is the second component. Now let us try to simplify this and see what is 44 into 15. We got this in time rate itself. This is going to work out to 660 rupees. Let us see what is this thing going to be. 44 into 15 into 16 by 60. This works out to rupees 176. So this works out to rupees 176. So 660 plus 176, it gives us, together you get 660 plus 176, you get 836. So if the Rowan bonus plan is implemented, our worker is going to get 836 rupees. So this is the idea behind the Rowan bonus plan. Now let's look at the fourth type, which is going to be the Halsey bonus plan. Now, Halsey bonus plan also has a certain formula. In that, one thing is common: time taken into time rate. This is there. This is first component plus time saved into time rate into 50, or other, I can put it other way, time saved into 50% into time rate. This is the other formula for Halsey. This is the other bonus plan formula, Halsey's bonus plan formula. So here also you can see two components. This entire thing is the first component, and this second thing here after the plus symbol, let me highlight the plus symbol here. This entire thing you can see here, this is the second component. So the first component here is what I call as the minimum, and the second component is what I call as the bonus element. So if someone asks you what is the total wages that an employee or a worker would earn using the Halsey bonus plan, then you would say 1 plus 2. But if someone asks you what is the bonus alone, then you are going to be saying just the second component here. So time taken into time rate we know is a 660, but time saved into 50% of the time rate, this is how the bonus is calculated for the second component. So we saw it was calculated in a different way when the Rowan plan was taken. Halsey is suggesting a different way. Halsey is saying whatever time is saved, out of that take 50% of the time saved and offer the time rate for that. Or other way in which you can understand is 50% of the time rate you can take for whatever time you have saved. For the time saved, pay the worker for every unit of time saved at 50% of the usual time rate. So for the time taken, multiply that with time rate, pay him, and for the time saved, pay the worker for every unit of time saved at half of the wage rate. So that's the way you understand. Here again, 16 is the time saved into time rate we know is 15 rupees per hour into 50%. So this is the second component. So 660 plus 16 into 15 into 50% gives us 120. So together we get 720. So using the Halsey bonus plan, we get 720 rupees here. So this answers the requirement of the question. So it is the only thing important to understand is what is the formula of Rowan plan, how does it make sense, what is the formula for the Halsey plan, and how does that make sense. So with this we have answered the first question here. Now let's look at the second question. Two workmen, Vishnu and Shiva, produce the same product using the same material. Their normal wage rate is also the same. Vishnu is paid bonus according to the Rowan system, while Shiva is paid bonus according to the Halsey system. The time allowed to make the product is 100 hours. Vishnu takes 60 hours while Shiva takes 80 hours to complete the product. The factory overhead rate is rupees 10 per man hour actually worked. The factory cost for the product for Vishnu is 7280 and that for Shiva is 7600. You are required to A, find out the normal rate of wages, B, find out the cost of materials, and C, to prepare a statement comparing the factory cost of the products as made by the two workmen Vishnu and Shiva. Now, let's first understand what we'll have to do here. In this question, you will have to apply the basic knowledge of cost accounting that you will have, in which there are several stages of cost. For example, when you take materials and look at just that one component, you call it as material cost. When you take materials and direct labor for, let's say, a certain product and put both of these things together, you get what is called as prime cost. So materials plus labor is called as prime cost. Then to materials and labor, if you add manufacturing overheads, or what we can also call as factory overheads, if you add that materials plus direct labor plus factory overheads, then you get what is called as factory cost. So materials alone, material cost, material plus direct labor, prime cost. That prime cost plus factory overheads is called as factory cost. Now you are told the factory cost for one product manufactured by Vishnu, and you're also told the factory cost for the product with respect to Shiva's working on that. Now they want us to calculate what is the normal rate of wages, what is the cost of materials, and all those things. Essentially, by now you should have understood that this question is a back working question, or is a reverse back solving, or a reverse working question. Let's take it stage by stage and understand how this has to be approached. It's pretty simple here. We are now looking at question number 2. And the first thing we will do is, from every person's perspective, let us just write down whatever is given to us. Let's look at Vishnu first. We know that Vishnu is paid bonus according to the Rowan system. So it's important to understand. Let's put that clearly here so that we know how to calculate his total wages, Rowan's plan. Now let's start looking further. Both of these people, to manufacture that one unit of the product, see, the first line of the question tells they produce the same product using the same material. So what this means is the material cost is going to be the same thing. So whether Vishnu manufactures one unit of that product or Shiva manufactures one unit of that product, the material cost for manufacturing one unit of the product will remain the same. Which I not told in this question. I'm going to assume that to be a variable M. Let me call that as a variable M. So material cost of manufacturing one product is M. I don't know what that M is. Now I'm going to go for labor cost calculation. Let us see how many hours Vishnu is taking. Vishnu is taking 60 hours. So Vishnu is also to be paid based on the Rowan plan. So if you look at the Rowan plan, let's go back to our Rowan plan. Time taken into time rate plus time saved by time allowed into time taken into time rate. This is the formula for Rowan's plan. Now let's put that here into play. We know time taken is 60 hours for Vishnu. So first thing is time taken is 60 hours. Now, what is the rate at which Vishnu is paid for every hour? We don't know that. But we know one thing, whatever is the rate at which Vishnu is paid for every 1 hour of work, it is the same rate at which Shiva is also paid for 1 hour of his work, right? So, now we don't know that. That is in fact the first requirement. We are supposed to find out what is the normal rate of wages. In the absence of information, I'll assume that to be a variable. I'll say for every hour of work, Vishnu is paid X. And when I come to Shiva, I'm going to assume the same X only because they are paid the same rate per hour. So M plus 60X. Now, let's keep M aside, it's material cost. Now let's look at Rowan's plan here. 60X is the time taken into time rate. In Rowan plan, there are two components. Component 1 is this time taken into time rate is 60X. Now let's look at the bonus component. What is the bonus component? Time saved by time allowed. Let's first write that. How much is the time saved? When Vishnu is working, if 100 hours is the time allowed, Vishnu is taking only 60 hours. That would mean Vishnu can do the work. We can save 40 hours of time for manufacturing every one unit. So I'll say time saved is 40, time allowed is 100 into time rate into time taken. So that is going to again be 60X here. So this is going to be the labor cost. So this is the material component. This is the labor component. Then for us to calculate factory cost, we also need another thing, that is going to be the factory overheads. The question tells us the factory overhead is rupees 10 per man hour worked. That means every hour worked by a worker, we will say that for 1 hour of that worker's work, 10 rupees of overhead cost is going to be there. So if Vishnu works, he is going to take 60 hours, and for every hour, if 10 rupees is going to be the absorption rate, 60 into 10 is equal to 600 rupees. So for 1 hour of Vishnu's work, 10 rupees will be there. For manufacturing one unit, 60 hours is taken, let's say. So 600 rupees is the factory overhead cost. All of these things put together, you are going to get Vishnu's total cost, which is 7,280. So now let us just very quickly highlight the things here. M, material cost, then everything put together, this is the labor cost. This entire thing put together, this is the overhead, factory overheads cost. Together you have something which is what I call as factory cost. Now, before we go to what will be the equation like this for Shiva, let's simplify this here. M plus 60x, see 60x into 40%, 40 by 100 essentially works to 40%. 60x into 40% gives me 24x. 60x plus 24x gives me 84x. So let me simplify my entire labor cost to 84x plus 60 into 100, 600. This is going to give me 7,280. Let me take the 600 to the other side. So 7,280 minus 600 is going to give me 6,680. So M plus 84x is going to give me 6,680. Let me call this as equation 1. Okay, I'm going to have this as equation 1. And now you know that I can frame a similar equation like this with respect to Shiva also. Then I have two equations. I have two variables, obviously two linear equations, so two variables. I can find out the value for each of those things, which is what I'm going to do right now. Let's go to the next case here. So let's look at how I'll frame this equation for Shiva. But for Shiva, I should use the Halsey plan. Rowan plan is only for Vishnu. For Shiva, I'm going to use the Halsey plan. So let's capture that. Now, materials, M will not change because same material is used, same product is manufactured. Now how many hours is Shiva going to take? Shiva is taking 80 hours. So even in Halsey plan, first component is time taken into time rate. I don't know the rate, I know it is going to be assumed as X. The time taken I'm going to say will be 80 hours. So I'm going to say 80x. Okay, so M plus M materials, 80x is the first component, plus what is the formula for the bonus component? Time saved into 50% into time rate. What is the time saved? 20 hours. Because if 100 hours is allowed and he takes only 80 hours, obviously time saving is 20 hours. So 20 into what is 50% of this? 10 hours into what is the time rate? I don't know. Let me assume this to be X. So this is my labor cost calculation using the Halsey plan. Plus for every hour of work 10 rupees is the factory overhead I'm going to absorb. So the entire thing here, this will work out to be 7,600. So now you get, let's simplify this, M plus 80x plus, you see 20 into 50% is 10, 10 into x, 10x, 80x plus 10x, you get 90x here, plus 80 into 10, 800, gives you 7,600. So now take the 800 to the other side. 7,600 minus 800 gives you 6,800. So I'll say M plus 90x is going to give you 6,800. Let me call this as equation 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve these two equations here. So I'll go to the previous page, previous case, I'll take this. I have equation 1 here. M plus 84x is 6,680. Let me put that here. M plus 84x is going to be 6,680. This is the first equation. Then I have another equation. M plus 90x is going to be 6,800. This is the second equation I have. So from this what I can understand is if I do an operation here, 2 minus 1, second equation minus first equation, M and M will get cancelled here. I'll be left with 6x is equivalent to 6,800 minus 66680. That gives me a 120. Okay, that gives me a 120. So from this what I understand is x is equivalent to 20 rupees. So what is x? X was the variable that we assigned for the timely rate. In fact, that is what we are supposed to be calculating in the first to address the first part of the question here. So we can say once we get x here, let me call this as normal hourly rate. So this is the normal hourly rate. Now what I will do is I'll go to the second part of the question to find the cost of materials. So it's very simple. What we can do is M is what we are supposed to be finding out. Let's substitute in equation 2 itself. Let me say M plus 90 into 20 is going to be 6,800. M plus 90 into 20 is 1,800 is equivalent to 6,800. So M is going to give me rupees 5,000. M is basically rupees 5,000. So what is M? M is the material cost. So let me write that here. So we have answered two parts of the question. Let's look at the third part of the question here. To prepare a statement comprising the factory cost of the products as made by the two workmen. Let's not look at preparing the statement as such, but let's discuss. Okay. So how we actually do this is, for Vishnu, we are going to say 5,000 material cost plus 84 into 20, that is going to give us 1,680. This entire thing I'll call this as prime cost, and then 600 I'll call this as factory overheads. So prime cost plus factory overheads, I will get my 7,280. This is how a statement must be prepared. And then similarly here I'm going to say 5,000 plus 1,800, 5,000, going back here, yes, 5,000 plus 1,800, and then I'm going to add that 800 and say 5,000 plus 1,800 will give me the prime cost, and then my 1,800 is factory overheads. If I put all of these two things together, I'm going to get my factory cost. So that is how I will approach problem number 2, right? So we have looked at problem number 1, we have looked at problem number 2. By now you should have gotten a kind of understanding, I would say a reasonable grip on how to answer a Halsey or a Rowan type of a question. So that is absolutely something that is very, very important. So now let's take a quick look at problem number 3. A worker whose day work wages is 2.5 an hour received production bonus under the Rowan scheme. He carried out the following work in a 48-hour week. Job 1, 1,500 items at 4 hours per 1,000 items. Job 2, 1,800 items at 3 hours per 1,000 items. Job 3, 9,000 items at 6 hours per 1,000 items. Job 4, 1,500 items for which no standard time was fixed, and it was arranged that the worker would be paid a bonus of 25%. Actual time on the job was 4 hours. 2,000 items at 8 hours per 1,000 each item. And it was estimated to be half finished. Job number 2 was carried out on a machine running at 90% efficiency, and an extra time of 1/9 of the standard time was given to compensate the worker. 4 hours were lost due to the power cut. Calculate the earnings of the workers, clearly stating your assumptions for the treatment given by you for the hours lost due to power cut. So here there is a new learning element, but we will look at that when we are supposed to do. See, first let's look at this, approach this calculation stage by stage. So we are looking at question number 3 here. The first thing I am going to do is I am going to be calculating time allowed. I'm going to be calculating time allowed in terms of number of hours for all the jobs. For all the jobs, let's see what is going to be the time allowed for all the jobs. Okay, so let's take one by one here. Let's take job 1 first. Now, it says 1,500 items at 4 hours per 1,000. Basically, to manufacture 1,000 items, 4 hours is given. So to manufacture 1,500 items, how many hours is going to be given? So 4 hours. In 4 hours, how many items should you manufacture? 1,000 items. But how many are you going to be manufacturing? 1,500. That means we get 6 hours here. So what this essentially means is, to manufacture 1,500 units in job 1, you are allowed a time of 6 hours. So you can't say 4 hours is the time allowed. You can't directly take 4 hours, because you should calculate time allowed for your specific output. Here 4 hours is the time allowed for 1,000 units, but we are not talking about manufacturing 1,000 units. We are talking about manufacturing 1,500 units. So we should correctly take 6 hours here. That is one important point. Job 2, 1,800 items at 3 hours per 1,000. So basically let's look at job 2 here. We'll say 3 hours, and this is going to be for 1,000. Let's look at that once again. 1,000 units, and we are now manufacturing how many units? 1,800 items. So This will tell us how many number of hours for 1800 items. But there is a qualifier given to us with respect to job 2. Job 2 was carried out on a machine running at 90% efficiency, and an extra allowance of 1/9 of the standard time was given to compensate. That means this is normal time allowed, but in addition to this, they are saying that 1/9 of this entire thing, 1/9 of this 3 by 1000 into 1800, this entire thing will be allowed because some machine downtime was there. Anyway, let's calculate that. So 1800 divided by 1000 into 3 gives us this entire thing works out to 5.4 hours, and 1/9 of 5.4 hours is zero point 0.6 hours. So 5.4 plus 0.6, we again get 6 hours for job 2. Then let's look at job 3. Job 3, 9,000 items at 6 hours per 1000 units. So job 3 basically 6 hours for 1000 units, 9,000. So I'm going to say 6 hours, 1000 items into how many here, 9,000. So 9 into 6 hours, let's see how much I get here. 6 hours per 1000 into 9,000. So 6 into 9, I'll get 54 hours here. Then let's look at job 4. Job 4, we should take note of what is given. 1500 items for which no standard time was fixed. Actual time was 4 hours. 25% bonus is given. So what we should say is, when you don't have any time allowed given to you like this, and actual time was taken is 4 hours, and they are giving 25% bonus, what it means is they are basically saying you have taken 4 hours, but we are willing to pay you for 5 hours. Basically, 4 hours is the time taken. What is 25% bonus? Whatever you get for 4 hours, 1/4 of that will be given to you extra. So 4 hours, let's say some rate is there, okay? 4 hours into X. Now, what they are saying, 4 hours into X plus 1/4 of 4 hours into X will give you. So basically saying 4X plus 1X. So they're saying 5X. Basically, they are willing to pay you for 5 hours. So we'll directly write 5 hours here. So whenever you don't have standard time, you can treat it like that. Now let's look at job 5. What is the standard time that it takes? Now 2000 items at 8 hours per 1000. Each item was estimated to be half finished. So we are basically saying 8 hours for 1000 items, and we are manufacturing 2000 items. So looks like there are 16 hours, but we should be careful. We should multiply this with 15% because we are talking about semi-finished items. So this will again work out to be 8 hours. So totally I'm going to say my time allowed is 6 plus 6 plus 54 plus 5 plus 8. So I get 6 plus 6, 12 plus 54, 66 plus 5 plus 8 gives me 79 hours. So I am allowed a time of 79 hours to do all these jobs. But how many hours do I actually take? It looks like I have worked for a 48-hour week. So now let us see how to calculate the total pay that is going to come. Let's go to the next page here. Now, wage payment Rowan scheme. Yes, we are supposed to do it under Rowan scheme. Now, first component in Rowan scheme is time into time rate. This is the first component, time taken into time rate. Now, plus time saved divided by time allowed into time into time rate. Now, here it's important to understand time into time rate. Should we say 44 hours into rate or should we say 48 hours into rate? Now, the reason is we had a 4 hours power cut. So the workers have been in the factory for a 48 hours week, but they have actually done 44 hours of work. And in that they have finished job 1 to job 5. So what was supposed to take 79 hours, they have been in the factory for just for 48 hours to do that, but they have worked only for 44 hours. Now, can I say 44 hours into time rate here? Now, I'm going to actually say 48 into time rate of 2.5 because this is a power cut that the workers had no control over. So the minimum that they should get is 48 hours. The minimum that they should get is a 48 hours thing because there is the power cut probably is something that is not obviously is not something within their control. So if you tell them I'll pay you for 44 hours, then obviously it's not that they were idle. Now we will have a separate discussion on idle time. So in that we will be discussing this all of these things in a lot more detail. But now just to address this requirement of the question, let's look at this right now. So if it's something that was within their control and they remained idle, you probably don't pay them. But this is not within their control. So minimum 48 into 2.5. If I'm not wrong, 2.5 is the per hour rate. Now the next thing that we should look at is what is the time saved. Now the time saved, you can say, is 79 minus time taken. Now here when you look at time allowed, 79 is time allowed minus time taken. Here if you look at the number that must come here if I put 48 and say 48 hours is what you have taken, 79 hours is the time allowed, 79 minus 48 is your time saved. Now again workers might come and tell me, look, we wanted wages minimum for 48 hours, but when you're talking about bonus, you allowed 79 hours. We didn't completely work for 48 hours. So for bonus calculation, you should calculate time saved as 79 minus 44 because actually what must have taken us 79 hours, we were able to do in 44 hours itself. So it is incorrect for you to say 48 hours. Then the management may come and ask, there alone you wanted minimum for 48 and 2.5. Here why don't they say 79 minus 48? Here the workers say, I want 44 hours. Now again, that is why the question tells us, please note clearly, it talks about assumptions. We can say that this argument that the workers may pose is taken because larger the gap here, larger the time saved, more bonus they will get. So as workers, they may definitely want that. So will the management buy that statement or not? We assume that they probably would. So we can say divided by time allowed 79 into time taken into time rate. Here we can again use 48 into 2.5. Let's simplify this. 48 into 2.5 gives us 120 plus 79 minus 44 divided by 79 minus 44 divided by 79 gives us 0.4430 into 120. Let us see what we get here. 120 into 0.4430, 53.16. Let me round it off to 120 plus 53. I will say 173 rupees is the bonus that 173 rupees is the entire wage payment that the workers are eligible to get. So this answers the third question. Now let's look at the last question, and with which we can wind up this discussion on the first part of the topic, which focuses on wage payment systems and bonus. Last question is pretty interesting. In fact, we will work less with numbers given in the question, but in fact we are going to be looking at Halsey plan and Rowan plan from an interpretational angle. It's an interesting one. Halsey versus Rowan scheme, problem number 4. A, bonus paid under the Halsey plan with a bonus at 50% of the time saved, I mean normal Halsey plan bonus, equals the bonus paid under the Rowan system. When will this system, when will this statement hold good? Your answer should contain the proof. Basically, let's look at part B later. In part A, what they are actually saying is, let's say there is worker A and there is worker B. Worker A is paid wages based on a Halsey plan. worker B is paid wages based on Rowan plan. Let's say everything else is the same. When will both of these people be eligible for the same wages? This is what the question is asking. Now let's try to go about it for a proof for that. Now, Halsey plan, let us look at what is the total payment. Time taken into time rate, this is first component, plus time saved into time rate into 50%. This is the second component. This is what you get as a total payment in Halsey. Now Rowan, let us see what is the total payment we'll get. Time taken into time rate, the first component is there, but Rowan bonus calculation is time saved divided by time allowed into, we have time taken into time rate. This is the here let me highlight the two components by circling the plus symbol here so that you are very clear about it, and let me put this bracket also here. So this is how you have the total payments under Halsey and Rowan. We are going to say both must be equal. Worker A, let's say, gets this, worker B, let's say, gets this. We should say both is equal. So I am going to equate this and say TT into TR plus time saved into time rate into 50%, which is basically Halsey wage, is equivalent to Rowan wage into TR plus TS by TA into time taken into time rate. This is what Rowan plan says. Now straight away I can do one thing here. I can cancel this one and this one because both are going to be equal. Now another thing I can do, now I can let me expand TS into TR into 50% is equivalent to TS by TA into TT into TR. Now from this let me take the TA to the other side. So I'll say TA time allowed into time saved into time rate into 50% is equivalent to time saved into time taken into time rate. Now let me cancel off all the things I can cancel. There is a time saved here, there is a time saved here. There's a time rate here, there's a time rate here. So what I see is 50% is equivalent to let me take the TA there, time taken divided by time allowed. So now this leaves me with time taken by time allowed is 50%. So what this essentially means is if you take 50% of the time that you allow, I mean time, if you take 50% of the time that you are allowed, then the balance 50% is savings. If this is the case, then whether you are paid bonus as per Halsey or you are paid bonus as per Rowan, your bonus is not going to change. So this is the only case when that will happen. So if a worker, let's say worker A is allowed to do a certain job, he is given 10 hours time. Worker B is allowed to do, I mean he is also supposed to do a job, he is also given 10 hours time. Then worker A takes 5 hours, worker B also takes 5 hours, their TR is the same. Then whether Halsey is given or Rowan is given, both of these people will get the same pay. So that's not going to be the case when anything is different. If it's going to be 60% or 40%, any different percentage, it's not going to hold true. Only if the time taken is 50% of the time allowed, there is a 50% savings, then Halsey and Rowan will give you the same result. Now the second part in fact wants us to prove that they say the time allowed for a job is 8 hours, the hourly rate is ₹8. Show the total bonus earned, the total earnings of an employee and the hourly rate under the Halsey system and the Rowan system for each hour saved progressively. Okay. So now you see a table in front of you. So for different number of hours taken, let's see what is the total wages. So the question asks us to do it successively. That means for 8 hours, for 7 hours, 6 hours, 5 hours, 4, 3, 2 and 1. But let's just do it for just a few of these things. For the others it's just going to be similar. 8, 6, 4 and 2. Minimum, this is the formula I've used here. Total time into time rate. So for example 8 hours, 8 into 8 64, 6 hours, 6 into 8 48, 4 hours, 4 and 8 32, 2 hours, 2 and 8 16. And then for bonus, this is the formula I've used for Halsey here. Now this is looking at Halsey here. Time saved into time rate into 50%. For example, if it's 8 hours, no time saved into 8 rupees into 50%, obviously 0. For 6 hours, 2 hours is the time saved into 816 into 50%, you get 8 here. And then for 4 hours, time saved is 4 hours into 832 into 15%, you will get 16. And for 2 hours, time saved is 6 hours into 848 into 50%, you get 24. So first component is minimum, second component is bonus. Add all of these things, you will get 64, 56, 48 and 40 respectively. So for different time takens, when the time allowed is 8, these are the total wages if the Halsey system is used. Hourly rate, obviously I divided 64 by 8, you will get all of these things. Now go to Rowan here. Rowan, I've done a similar calculation, minimum and bonus. For minimum formula, for bonus, the bonus formula is used. So I here get 64 plus 0, 48 plus 12, 32 plus 16 and 16 plus 12, 64, 60, 48 and 20. So you can see that when there is no time saved at all, then you still get total wages to be equal. Now that is because when there is no time saved, Rowan or Halsey do not talk about any incentive. So it's only the minimum component. So bonus is 0. But other than that, let me draw your attention to 48 here and let me draw your attention to 48 here. We can see that 4 hours is 50% of the time allowed. So we saw earlier that when we take 50% of the time allowed, let me show you where. So here we saw when we took 50% of the time allowed, then we get the same result for Rowan and Halsey. So that's exactly what we see here. One another important part that we can understand is when the time taken is above, like for example, if it's 8 hours or 6 hours, when the time taken is higher than 50%, then you can see that Halsey plan gives you lesser total wage compared to Rowan plan. Because let's say take 6 hours for example. If 6 hours is the time taken, if Rowan plan is implemented, the employee has to be paid, the worker has to be paid 60 rupees. But if Halsey plan is implemented, he should be just paid 56 rupees. But for 2 hours, which is lesser than the 2 hours, which is lesser than the 50%, if Halsey is adopted, then 40 rupees has to be paid, but if Rowan is adopted, 28 rupees only has to be paid. So from this we can have some conclusions here. No time saved. Then let's call this conclusion. So no time saved, you will see that there is no bonus at all. 50% time saved, then you can see Halsey equivalent to Rowan. I mean that means whatever you use, you going to get the same thing. Time saved is lesser than 50%. That means Halsey is better, and time saved is greater than 50%, then Rowan is better. So these are the observations that we get here. So this answers the fourth part of the question.